History is often told through dates, battles, and kings. But sometimes history begins in silence. Not on a battlefield, not with a sword raised, but in a longhouse with blood quietly dripping onto wood. What you're about to hear is not just the story of a Viking invasion. It is the moment vengeance became organized, the moment rage turned into strategy, the moment England's fate was sealed, long before the first longship appeared on the horizon. Imagine the year is 865 AD inside a Danish longhouse. The fire crackles low. A messenger has just finished speaking. No one moves. The silence is heavy, yet the violence has already begun. Four brothers sit around a rough wooden table. They are the sons of Ragnar Lothbrok. Sigurd, snake in the eye, holds a small knife in his hand, slowly trimming his fingernails as the words sink in. He does not shout. He does not look up. His blade slips past the nail, through flesh, carving down until it strikes bone. He feels nothing. Across from him, Bjorn Ironside grips a carved bone chess piece. His fingers tighten. There is a sudden crack. The object shatters in his hand. Shards bite into his palm as blood begins to drip, steady and deliberate, onto the table below. This was not mourning. This was a declaration. This was the precise moment the vengeance of the Great Heathen Army was born. To understand their reaction, you must understand the insult. The messengers confirmed what no son should ever hear. King Aella of Northumbria had not merely executed Ragnar, he had humiliated him. Ragnar Lothbrok, the terror of Europe, was stripped of his armor and thrown into a pit of venomous snakes, left to die slowly, painfully, and publicly. Aella believed he was proving something. That Ragnar was not a god, not a legend, just a man. But as the venom spread through his body, Ragnar laughed. And with his final breath, he delivered a prophecy that would echo across kingdoms. How the little piglets will squeal when they learn how the old boar suffered. Aella believed he had ended a threat. In truth, he had ignited a fuse. He forgot that the old boar had sons, and those sons were now the most dangerous warlords in Europe. In Denmark, there were no tears, only action. Sigurd withdrew the knife from his finger. Bjorn wiped the blood from his hand. Messengers were sent in every direction, across seas, through forests, into every corner of the Viking world. This would not be a raid for silver. There would be no interest in slaves. Treasure meant nothing. This was a campaign with a single purpose: annihilation. Warriors answered the call from Norway, Sweden, and Ireland. Old enemies laid aside grudges. Mercenaries refused payment, asking only to be present. They all understood the scale of what was coming. King Aella believed himself safe behind stone walls across the sea. He had no idea that he had just summoned a force unlike anything England had ever faced. The Great Heathen Army was assembling, and it was coming to ensure that everyone responsible for Ragnar's death would pay in screams. In late 865 AD, the people of East Anglia looked out toward the sea and felt their blood run cold. A Viking alarm usually meant 3, maybe 5 longships, fast strikes, quick escapes. This time, the horizon itself seemed alive. Hundreds of dragon-headed prows emerged from mist. This was no raid. It was a floating city, a migration of death. Historians would later call it the Great Heathen Army. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle simply called it Mysel here, the Great Host. And it wasn't just warriors. Smiths came with their tools. Women and children followed. Horses were brought ashore. They were not here to take silver and leave. They were here to take land, to burn crops, to dismantle the kingdoms of England, stone by stone. At the head of this vast force stood not Bjorn, the strongest, nor Sigurd, the most unyielding. It was Ivar the Boneless. For centuries, historians have debated his name. Was he crippled by disease, unable to walk? Or was boneless a metaphor for his unnatural flexibility, his unpredictability, his mind? The sagas say he was often carried into battle on a shield. But make no mistake, Ivar was not weak. He was the architect. While his brothers burned with rage, Ivar burned with calculation. He understood something crucial. To destroy a king like Aella, axes alone would not be enough. You needed a plan. Northumbria was too strong to assault directly from the sea. So Ivar did something unexpected. He bypassed his target entirely and landed in East Anglia. Why? Because Ivar was playing a long game. He did not provoke immediate battle. Instead, he terrorized the region into submission. He demanded horses. He transformed his sea-born warriors into mounted cavalry. He spent the winter gathering intelligence, forging weapons, and letting fear drift north like a slow-moving plague. He was making Aella wait, because Ivar understood that anticipation can be more painful than suffering itself. By the time the snow melted in 866, the Great Heathen Army was no longer a furious mob. It had become a disciplined war machine, mounted, supplied, and starving for blood. They turned north. The piglets were done squealing. It was time to hunt. Meanwhile, Northumbria was doing the invaders' work for them. The kingdom was tearing itself apart in civil war. King Aella, the murderer of Ragnar, was locked in a bitter struggle with the rightful king, Osbert. Their hatred blinded them. They failed to notice the shadow rising from the south. Civil war is a gift to an invader, and Ivar accepted it gladly. In the autumn of 866, he marched north, using the stolen horses to move with terrifying speed. Villages were ignored. The army aimed straight for the heart of the north, the ancient Roman city of York. But Ivar didn't just choose his target. He chose his moment. November 1st, All Saints' Day. On that day, Northumbria's nobles, generals, and bishops would be gathered inside churches, unarmed, distracted, deep in prayer, expecting protection from God. Instead, they received the heathen army. The attack came while the bells were still ringing. York's defenses were thin. The gates fell before hymns ended. It was not a battle. It was slaughter in sacred halls. By sunset, York had fallen, and Ivar did not burn it. That would have been the act of a raider. Instead, he occupied the city. He repaired the Roman walls, secured the granaries, turned York into a Viking fortress deep in enemy territory. Then he sat on Aella's throne and waited. He knew York's fall would force his enemies to unite. He wanted Aella and Osbert together. He wanted them to bring their armies to him. Why chase your prey when you can let it walk into the trap? It took 4 months for Northumbria to swallow its pride. For months of watching pagans sit in their capital, eat their food, mock their gods, and when they finally marched on York, they walked straight into Ivar's design. By March of 867 AD, the impossible finally happened. King Aella and his sworn enemy, Osbert, clasped hands. Pride was swallowed. Hatred was set aside. Their armies merged into one vast host. It was not yet called a crusade, but it carried the same certainty. They believed God marched with them. Convinced divine favor was on their side, the Northumbrians advanced on York, determined to drive the pagan invaders back into the sea. On March 21st, Palm Sunday, the assault began. At first, everything went according to plan. The English hurled themselves against York's ancient Roman walls with the fury of men who believed they were reclaiming what was sacred. They found weaknesses. They smashed gates. A triumphant roar surged through the ranks as soldiers poured into the city. York's narrow streets flooded with bodies. Thousands pressed forward, convinced the Vikings were fleeing. They had no idea they were walking into a trap. Ivar the Boneless had not lost the walls. He had surrendered them on purpose. The moment the bulk of the Northumbrian army was funneled into the twisting streets, the jaws snapped shut. Vikings rose from rooftops. They surged from side alleys. Shields locked at both ends of the avenues, sealing escape. York became a killing chamber. Numbers no longer mattered. In the suffocating chaos of street fighting, English spears were useless. This was no formation battle. It was close, brutal butchery. Axes swung. Knives flashed. Panic erupted. Men were crushed so tightly they couldn't even raise their weapons. They died standing, trampled, screaming. King Osbert fought fiercely, but courage meant nothing here. He was cut down and swallowed by the mud of the city he had tried to reclaim. The Holy War had become a slaughter. Yet amid the carnage, the Vikings followed strict orders. One man was not to be killed. From elevated ground, the sons of Ragnar searched the chaos, scanning faces, hunting for a single crown. King Aella saw his army collapse. He saw Osbert fall, and then he understood the truth with sickening clarity. The walls he had breached were no longer defenses. They were his prison. He tried to flee. A wall of Danish shields closed in. He was dragged from his horse, stripped of weapons, and forced to his knees in blood-soaked earth. The Battle of York was over. Silence returned, broken only by the dying. The Vikings did not kill Aella where he knelt. That would have been mercy. Instead, they chained him. They did not look at him with rage, but with anticipation. The war was finished. The ritual was about to begin. The Great Hall of York had witnessed kings before, but never judgment like this. Aella was hauled into the center, mud-caked, bloodied, his crown lost, his robes in tatters. Around him stood the chieftains of the Great Heathen Army, but his eyes locked on four figures seated before him, the sons of Ragnar. Bjorn Ironside sat with arms crossed, studying Aella like a butcher studies meat. Hvitserk idly traced the haft of his axe. Sigurd, snake in the eye, stared without blinking. But the most terrifying presence lay upon furs nearby. Ivar the Boneless could not stand. His legs were twisted and useless, yet his eyes burned with cold, calculating intelligence. The prophecy had come full circle. Aella saw the piglets Ragnar had warned him about. But these were no piglets. They were wolves. No record preserves their words, but the sagas speak of an intimacy more frightening than shouting. Ivar likely spoke softly. He asked about the pit, the snakes. Did my father scream? Did he beg? How long did it take for the venom to still his heart? Each question carved deeper than a blade. Aella had denied Ragnar an honorable death. Now, Ivar would deny him mercy. Under Viking law, a swift death was a gift. A sword through the heart. A clean beheading. Respect. Aella had forfeited that right. He was not treated as a prisoner of war, but as a criminal who had violated sacred custom. No ransom was offered. No exile discussed. Ivar gave a single signal. Aella was dragged from the hall, not to a dungeon, but to a hill overlooking York, visible to both Viking warriors and the trembling survivors below. The punishment chosen would echo through history. They prepared the blood eagle. Aella was forced face down. Hands and feet were staked, his body stretched until he was nothing but flesh and breath. He was no longer a king, he was a canvas. For centuries, scholars dismissed the blood eagle as myth. Too brutal, too precise. But on that cold Northumbrian afternoon, it was horrifyingly real. The executioner approached with a long blade. This was not hacking, it was deliberate. Two curved cuts were made along Aella's spine. Skin was peeled back, exposing muscle and bone. Then came hammer and chisel. One by one, ribs were broken free from the spine. The sound of snapping bone carried across the field. Each rib was bent outward, forming the shape of wings. Finally, the chest was opened. Lungs were pulled free and laid across the broken ribs. As they collapsed with each ragged breath, they fluttered, like wings struggling to fly. A blood-soaked eagle rose from the ruin of a man. Medical experts believe Aella likely died of shock or lung collapse before the ritual fully ended. But to the Vikings, his screams sealed his fate. He did not enter Valhalla. He died as an offering to Odin. His body was left on the hill, a warning to every king in England. The debt was paid. The old boar was avenged. Yet, as the sons of Ragnar stepped away, something became clear. The fury had not burned out. The Great Heathen Army was still hungry. Rather than returning to sea, they turned south. In 869 AD, they returned to East Anglia. King Edmund, who had once given them horses in exchange for peace, believed himself spared. He was wrong. Ivar honored no bargains with prey. This time, they demanded the kingdom itself. Edmund refused to submit, but he also refused to fight. A devout Christian, he chose faith over survival. He was captured near Hoxne. Ivar decided to make another example. If Aella's death was anatomy, Edmund's would be archery. According to later chronicles, Edmund was tied to a tree. The Vikings wanted to see if Christ would intervene. Archers formed ranks, not to kill quickly, but to torment. Volley after volley struck limbs and shoulders. Chroniclers wrote his body bristled with arrows like a hedgehog. Still alive, still bleeding, still praying. Ivar grew impatient. One final command was given. A swordsman stepped forward and severed Edmund's head, casting it deep into the forest so his followers could not bury him whole. Edmund the martyr did not die for Ragnar's murder. He died because he stood in the path of an avalanche. His death delivered a message to Wessex and Mercia alike. There would be no negotiations, no neutrality. You would die screaming like Aella or praying like Edmund, but you would die all the same. By 874 AD, the Great Heathen Army had effectively severed the head of England. Two of the four great kingdoms were already broken. Northumbria survived only as a hollow puppet. East Anglia was nothing more than a mass grave. The next target was Mercia, the vast, fertile heartland of the island. Its king, Burgred, studied the fates of Aella and Edmund. He saw the blood eagle. He saw the arrow-riddled martyr. And he understood a truth that terrified him. These were not men you could bargain with, and they were not men you could defeat. So Burgred made a decision history would never forgive. He did not fight. He did not pray. He fled. As Viking forces advanced on his capital at Repton, Burgred abandoned his crown. He gathered what gold he could carry and ran south, eventually reaching Rome. There, far from the land he had sworn to defend, he died in exile, buried in foreign soil. Mercia fell without a battle. The Vikings did not even need to draw their swords. Fear had conquered the kingdom for them. Now look at the map of England. Almost all of it had gone dark. Only one kingdom remained free. Wessex, the final barrier. If Wessex fell, England would not merely be conquered, it would disappear, absorbed entirely into the Scandinavian world. The Great Heathen Army understood this. They turned south with the unstoppable momentum of an avalanche. But in Wessex, they encountered something unfamiliar. Not a tyrant like Aella, not a martyr like Edmund, not a coward like Burgred. They found a young man named Alfred. At this point, Alfred was not yet the Great. He was a sickly prince plagued by chronic pain, often overshadowed by his warrior brother, King Aella. But Alfred possessed something even Ivar the Boneless respected: a mind. When the Vikings attacked Reading in 871, the fighting was savage and unresolved. Losses mounted on both sides. Unlike other kingdoms, Wessex struck back, but the sheer scale of the invasion, reinforced by a second wave known as the Great Summer Army, was overwhelming. Then Aethelred died. Alfred inherited the crown in the middle of a collapsing war. And he did something no one expected. He paid the Vikings to leave. The tribute, known as the Danegeld, was enormous. Critics later called it cowardice, likening Alfred to Burgred. But there was a critical difference. Burgred paid to save himself. Alfred paid to buy time. He knew his army was not ready. He needed ships, fortifications, training, intelligence. He needed to understand the enemy before facing them again. He purchased 5 years of silence. As the Vikings settled into their conquered lands, convinced Wessex was neutralized, Alfred watched, planned, learned. While the sons of Ragnar celebrated victory, they failed to see the architect of their resistance quietly taking shape. Then, just as suddenly as he had risen, the most feared man in Europe vanished. After the execution of King Edmund in 870 AD, Ivar the Boneless disappears from English records entirely. The commander who had orchestrated massacres and toppled kingdoms simply fades away. For centuries, historians were baffled. Did he retire? Was he killed? Did legend exaggerate his end? The answer lies across the Irish Sea in the annals of Ulster. There, Ivar reappears under a different name, Imar, king of the Norse of all Ireland and Britain. It seems that after breaking England's spine, he returned to Dublin to rule as a northern emperor. But the gods, it seems, have a sense of irony. Ivar the Boneless, the man who devised the blood eagle, who turned cities into slaughterhouses, did not die in battle. He did not fall with a sword in hand. He did not ride to Valhalla in glory. In 873 AD, the annals record that he died of a sudden, hideous disease. The man whose mind was a weapon, whose body was a burden, was finally betrayed by his own flesh. It is a quiet, almost anticlimactic end, but legend offers something darker. According to Norse tradition, before his death, Ivar ordered his body returned to England. He demanded burial on the very coast where the Viking invasion had begun. His prophecy was chilling. As long as his bones guarded the shore, no foreign invader would ever conquer England. For 2 centuries, the legend claimed, the curse held. Until 1066, William of Normandy, preparing his invasion, was deeply superstitious. The saga says he found Ivar's burial mound, unearthed the body, miraculously unrotted, and burned it to ash. Only then did he dare to cross the channel. Whether myth or memory, Ivar's legacy is undeniable. He came to avenge his father. He left having destroyed 2 kingdoms, executed 2 kings, and permanently altered the future of Britain. The piglet had grown into a monster. Yet when the monster vanished, the survivors were left to rebuild. The revenge of the Great Heathen Army was complete. Every man responsible for Ragnar Lothbrok's death had paid in blood. The north and east of England belonged to the Vikings. But revenge has consequences. The invaders did not leave. They stayed. They farmed. They traded. The lands they ruled became the Danelaw, a vast region where Norse laws, language, and customs fused with Anglo-Saxon life. Even today, place names across England whisper their presence. Ragnar's death did not just kill kings. It created a hybrid civilization. From chaos, something new was forged. And as the Vikings settled into power, they believed the war was over. They were wrong. In the marshes and strongholds of Wessex, Alfred was finished paying tribute. Finished watching. He was building ships, the first English navy. He was constructing fortified towns, designed to resist raids. He was preparing to do the impossible. The sons of Ragnar had taken their revenge. But the final question remained. Could they hold what they had conquered? Because the war of vengeance was over. The war for England's future was just beginning.